When a rules-based order was under challenge in Asia, the advice we got from Europe is do more trade. At least we're not giving you that advice.
What lies at the root of this war? What lies behind this war in Ukraine?
What lies behind this war is a strong deterrence from the free world to let authoritarian, autocratic nations to know that if they did this, they'll come out poorer than when they started it. That wasn't very clear. I think the countries of the world, the free world in particular, were slightly perhaps complacent, sort of lazy, easy, and this is a jolt, and one needs to learn from the leadership and the bravery of President Zelensky and the fine people of Ukraine that all of us need to stand for freedom. And if we do this, that's what will stop this war from happening again.
I think that's what lies really behind the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and decision of Russia to make this special operation is the deep conflict and divergence between Russia and the West, especially between Russia and the United States. I think that Ukraine, in this sense, has become for both sides a sort of proxy in much deeper conflict and disagreement on the arrangements of international order and European security order. And I think that this conflict could be prevented and could be easily resolved if Russia and especially the United States would be ready to invest their political capital into trying to find solutions on the initial state of the conflict.
I think Putin's deep belief that Ukraine is properly part of Russia, part of his own country's sovereignty, clearly an insecurity that's a product of the success of the West, of Ukraine's desire to be part of the West, and feeling that he hasn't had his rightful place in Europe and in the world. And this, of course, is a man with the willingness to use force and any other manner of military and economic instruments to achieve his goals. So I think it's a very dangerous, very toxic situation. And I would say not one that you can say the West was primarily responsible, to quote a friend and very well-known scholar, John Mearsheimer.
Look, I think the conflict in Ukraine, frankly, is based on a philosophical grievance that Vladimir Putin has kind of convinced himself about in his own private narrative. Unfortunately, because of the authoritarian system in Russia, he doesn't get good advice, good contestable advice that allows him to weigh up his options. In other words, he's surrounded by a bunch of yes men. I do not buy the narrative that the attack on the Ukraine was, in part at least, the result of a provocation of the West. It really boils down to bad governance in Russia, overconfidence and bad information.
I think the echo chamber is a very important part of it.
The echo chamber is an extremely important part of it, yeah.
I mean, we know what are the motivations of President Putin. I think that a lot of people have underestimated the actual sincerity of what he has been claiming about Ukraine, and I believe that actually his claims and his beliefs regarding Ukraine are actually the reason why Russia has done what it is doing today.
I think it's about someone who does not believe in the order of democracy, freedom and sovereignty.
I think about historical examples. And I think that today's situation is close to so-called 30 years war in 17th century in Western Europe. A lot of coalitions, some coalitions stable, some not stable, a lot of countries a lot of reckless movements, a lot of mistakes, and it takes 30 years to understand that the result of this war, the war finally changed nothing, except mentality of elites in Europe.
Listen, I think what we're seeing with Vladimir Putin is the reimagination of a Russian imperium, the imperial dream of some sort of Russian-speaking ethnic kingdom that never really quite existed in the way that he seems to be interpreting it to be.
Is being placed in India. I'm much more focused on the Indo-Pacific, and I've been quite surprised by just how much Russia and Ukraine is dominating Raisina, whereas Foreign Minister, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar said today, we need the world to look at the Indo-Pacific, which is where the real geostrategic competition is taking place.
But unfortunately, many powerful states like India and also other rising powers throughout the regions, neighboring regions, are so prudent and stepping so carefully, and there is no risk-taking at this time, and it could be dangerous, really, for international security.
I think what lies behind is the NATO thing, when Ukraine actually showed interest in joining it. I think that kind of jittered Putin. And I think the statements were not clear. And also, I think some point out that had the statements not come in that Ukraine wanted to join NATO, the attack would have not happened. But
nobody really gives credence to the idea that NATO is a hostile power. The scenario in which NATO was going to invade Russia exists only in Vladimir Putin's mind. Russia does have a concern with strategic space. It worries about the fact that it's being encroached upon its borders. But the idea that NATO was forcing this upon the member countries is a little bit of a fiction.
They claim that they have concerns about NATO being on their borders as well. There may be some legitimacy to that, but ultimately Ukraine is a sovereign country that should be able to choose which organizations and alliances it wants to join. And Russia does not get a veto just because some of these republics used to be a part of the Soviet Union.
It takes a lot of efforts from all sides of this conflict, from Western Europe and the United States, and a lot of effort. Maybe everybody should make step back and but now it seems to me majority of subjects of these conflicts, they are trying to reach victory, to win.
It has taken not only Russia, not only Ukraine, maybe 20 or 30 years back. These were all unavoidable, if you ask me.
Well, that's for Ukraine and Russia to sort it out. I mean, to be honest, there are two sides to every story, and media plays a big role in how everything's been manipulated. But Ukraine is a country on its own, right? So Ukraine should be left alone. It doesn't matter even if Russia is its neighbor.
Separating Russia from European Union, from European markets, from contacts with European people, from American people, and trying to isolate Russia is not the way we can be engaged together in resolving global issues.
In an ideal world, we would have solved the issues before the Russians went and invaded Ukraine. In an ideal world, we would have made offers to Russia, which we haven't. In an ideal world, I think it would have been useful to get a broad conference on security in Europe, with the inclusion of the Russian Federation, and the European Union could and probably should have made proposals not merely to Ukraine, but also to the Russian Federation of how to deepen economic ties. We haven't done that. So I think in an ideal world, that would be my answer.
No matter the differences and losses, you cannot contend that this war is going anywhere near well for Russia. And military prestige, as we all know, is a genuine and powerful geopolitical force. That military prestige is in tatters. How do you respond to that, sir?
It's a very significant question. You know, anyway, Russia didn't start mobilization yet. And Russia is using especially well-trained special forces, professional army forces, and not using its mobilization potential. Russia's mobilization potential is much higher, 3-4 times higher than Ukrainian. So in case the West is interested in a big war in Europe, with engagement of Ukraine, but also it will be dangerous for surrounding European countries, for surrounding Eastern European countries. In case the West is looking for such conflict, I think that we are on the way there. And I'm sure that rational minds in Brussels, in Paris, in Berlin, in Washington and in Moscow are not interested in such development of the conflict, which spirally is taking more and more people inside, more and more blood inside, more and more arms and ammunition. So if we will stop now, it will be less dangerous than if we will stop in half a year.
Now, this is going to be very similar to the Cold War. And the only difference is we don't have leaders that have thought a lot about nuclear war deterrence. The ones that thought about it a lot, like the Eisenhowers and the Kennedys and the Nixons and the Reagans, they struggled with this. So imagine today's leaders who have hardly thought about this, have no education in it. So the chance of making a mistake could be greater.